Hi, class. Welcome to the next lesson. After looking at the glorious Empire of Rome and looking at the rise of Christianity within Rome, today we're going to talk about the fall of Rome, the Roman Empire, and how Rome goes from the mightiest empire in the world to basically a splintered, defeated collection of states. And we're also going to be talking about its legacy, some of the things that even to this day um, we have seen Rome's effects and influence and on our government and laws and art. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. So here are the essential questions, the things that we're going to be able to answer by the end of the lesson. Which types of forces or events bring about genuine historical change? That is, which generally disrupt patterns of continuity. And one thing that genuinely disrupted the world, at least in Europe and a lot of the Western world, was the fall of the Western Roman Empire. And you're probably thinking, well, why did you just say Western Roman Empire? What's that? Well, we're going to talk a little bit about that because at some point the Roman Empire is divided between the East and West. The second question, how are governments established, maintained, and changed? We're going to see some reforms and changes by emperors within the Roman Empire. And we're also going to look at how do empires fall? What were the factors that caused one of the greatest empires in all of human history to fall? We're going to figure that out today. And lastly, how does the Roman Empire impact our world today? All right, so there are going to be a couple of main reasons why Rome falls. The first is going to be bad emperors. And the last emperor of the Pax Romana is Marcus Aurelius. And most emperors before that, for about 5 or 6 emperor period, emperors were chosen, not because they were related to the previous emperor, but they were chosen because they were the most well-equipped to lead the Roman Empire. And because of that, Rome expanded. Rome was rich. Rome was at its height when the emperor was the best person to run the empire. But after Marcus Aurelius, that does not happen anymore. And now that you're going to have emperors that are chosen because they were great generals, because of family ties, because of that, these rulers really won't have any idea how to rule, how to create an effective empire. And the second reason the empire falls is because there's an economic problem. Because Rome is not expanding anymore, they can't plunder new territories and take their gold or silver. And when you are lacking in that kind of revenue, you're going to have an economic problem because at this point, Rome is spending a lot. Rome is spending a lot of money on welfare, on pension plans for its Roman citizens, on free access to Rome's games. And to keep that up, they have to raise taxes. And when you raise taxes, you make the poor unhappy. And what they're also going to do is mint coins with less silver. This means inflation, which happens when there's higher prices for goods. And that's going to destabilize the economic situation in Rome. And the third problem is agriculture, because agriculture was so important. The land was constantly farmed because agriculture was so important. And when this land is constantly farmed and new topsoil is not put on, soil will lose its fertility. It loses nutrients and they won't be able to grow as many crops. And that's going to create food shortages within Rome. And when you have food shortages, population declines and you have disease, people get sick, and people are going to continue to be unhappy. And the fourth thing is the Roman military is going to be very much more so disorganized because there is so much territory that the Roman Empire now needs to expand, to control, and protect. The Roman Empire doesn't have enough soldiers. So what it does is it hires mercenaries to defend Rome. Now, these mercenaries will not be loyal to Rome. They will be loyal to money, and they'll be lured to people who give them the most money. And that's going to play a huge factor into the actual fall of Rome. So those are the four main reasons why Rome falls. Now, here are some notes. You should probably write these down, pause and write these down, or take a picture of them and save them on your computer. The immediate cause, the immediate main reason that Rome fell is because of the invasion of barbarian tribes, Germanic tribes, and the Huns, which we're going to talk about in a little bit here. But if we're really getting into the contributing factors behind that main reason, we're looking at political, social, economic, and military reasons. And to me, in my opinion, the most important one is economic. Um, when you don't have money from conquests, so gold and silver is being drained. That means you don't have. Means you have a tax burden. It means you have inflation, which disrupts trade. And when that's all disrupted, you have poor harvests because of farming, and that's going to widen the gap between the rich and poor and impoverish them and not make them as strong and protected against these barbarian tribes that are coming in. Now, one emperor who tried to reform this is Diocletian. So I recommend, before I go forward, look at some of these reasons. I've went over the most important, which is economic, but I would take a look at the others. Now, Diocletian's going to try to reform some of this, and he's going to become emperor in 284 CE, and he's going to do 4 things to reform Rome and try to help it, fix it. The first he's going to do is limit personal freedoms. That's going to control the masses, use fear instead of bribery to control the people. The second, he's going to double the size of the Roman army, and that's going to provide more stability from and protect them from abroad against invading peoples, right? The third thing is he's going to control. He's going to increase. He's going to control prices, control inflation by price fixing. Now, this is going to hurt Rome. Actually, it's going to hurt Rome economically, but it's also going to stabilize the situation with people where they won't want to rebel against the Roman Empire because he'll end up controlling the high prices, so people aren't as unhappy. And the fourth thing is very interesting, is he's actually going to divide the empire between East and West. Now, the Eastern Empire is going to consist of Greece, the Anatolian Peninsula, Turkey, Syria, and Egypt, while the western portion of the Roman Empire is going to be Italy, Gaul, Britain, and Spain. The eastern side is going to speak Greek. The western side, the main language is going to be Latin. And there's going to be a co-ruler to separate the division of power between these two sections of the empire. Now, he's going to retire in 305 CE, but civil war is going to break out. You're going to have a bunch of generals who are going to vie for control for the Roman Empire. And the winner of this is actually going to be Constantine. Here is a little bit. Constantine is emperor. And you're going to have Constantine. And we talked about Constantine in a previous video. He's the emperor who has this vision of a cross. He gets his soldiers put on a shield of a soldier. Sorry. He's the emperor who has a vision of a cross that his soldiers put on their shields. And he believes it helps him to win his battle. And he legalizes Christianity as a result of that. And then in 312 Common Era CE, he's going to take control of the western part of the empire. And in 324, he's going to take control of the eastern part as well. So he's going to actually reunite both halves that Diocletian splits. Now, in 330 CE, Constantine's going to do something very interesting, very controversial. He's going to move the capital of the Roman Empire to a place called Byzantium, and he's going to rename it Constantinople, city of Constantine. Now, Constantinople is a city that is on something that's called the Bosphorus Strait, and it's basically a small bit of water that separates the Mediterranean Sea and the Aegean Sea from the Black Sea, which is going to be up here. So you can see the Black Sea's up here, right? And so it's a very important trading center, Constantinople, given its position here. But this also means that this is a very This also means that it's very important that the center of Roman power is not going to be in Rome anymore. It's actually going to be Constantinople. And when the western half of the Roman Empire falls, because it's going to be split again, the Roman culture is still going to be preserved in Constantinople, believe it or not, for another 1,000 years. And we're going to talk about that some more in a little bit. So, like I said, because he moves the power to Constantinople, he shifts it away from Rome. But because of that, when Rome does split and the western half of the Roman Empire falls, the eastern half will continue for another 1,000 years. Now, the western half is going to crumble, and the reason why is because of the Huns. The Huns they're kind of crazy people from the Russian steppe that move into Europe. And what happens is when they move into Europe, they threaten the Germanic tribes that are in Europe at that time. And what happened is these Germanic tribes, like the Visigoths and the Ostrogoths, they have to move farther into Western Europe to protect themselves from the Huns. And they flee into Roman territory. And you can see this on the map here. You can see the red are the Huns, and they are moving in from Eastern Europe, the Russian steppe, near Central Asia. And they're moving here and displacing these Germanic tribes, right? And so with them, a lot of these Germanic tribes fleeing into Roman territory, what the Romans are going to do is they're going to hire these barbarian tribes, which are excellent warriors, and they're going to hire them as mercenaries. And the problem is, when you bring them in like that and you train them, you hire them as mercenaries, what's going to happen is they're going to get upset and you have a potential for rebellion. And that's what's going to happen. These Germanic tribes are going to invade Rome in 310 Common Era CE and plunder Rome for 3 days. And in 444, the Huns are actually going to attack both of these tribes, both of these sides of the Roman Empire. And you can see from this map here the movement of these groups. You can see the Huns moving in underneath some of these tribes, the Vandals, right? And you can see the Visigoths, which actually were based in the eastern part of the Roman Empire. And they actually travel as a group, sack Rome, and then settle in Spain. And believe it or not, even after the eastern half of the Roman Empire falls in the 1400s, there are still remnants of the Roman Empire left in Spain because of the Visigoths, because of how heavily they were influenced by Roman culture when they were mercenaries. Also, you can see another group, like I mentioned, called the Vandals. They are in yellow on this map, the yellow arrow. The Vandals moved from Germany, modern-day Germany, through Spain into North Africa, and they also sack Rome from the south. Now, when the Western Roman Empire falls, the Roman Empire as we know it doesn't exist anymore. But that doesn't mean it's gone. In fact, it just starts another empire called the Byzantine Empire. And its capital, Constantinople, its capital is Constantinople, and they're going to have a very interesting blend of Eastern traditions and culture and thinking with Roman culture and tradition. And this is going to exist for 1,000 more years and actually fall in the 1400s. So really, when you think about it, the Roman Empire actually lasted until about the 1400s. So it was just for the last 1,000 years, it was a little bit different than the Roman Empire that we usually think of. And the last emperor for the Roman Empire was Romulus Augustulus, and he's ousted by the Ostrogoths in 426. And that spells the end of the Western Roman Empire, but also, like I said, the beginning of the Byzantine Empire. And now we're going to be talking about the impact of Rome. Why do we learn about the Roman Empire? What are some of the things that the Romans create that are so important to us today? Because really, the roots of Western civilization that we experience today are from the Western Roman Empire and the Roman Empire itself. So we're going to take a look at those things. Now, the first thing is that the Romans do very interesting. The Romans, a lot of their ideas, a lot of their philosophies, even their religion, are adopted from Greek and Hellenistic culture. And when they are combined with Roman culture, it creates something called Greco-Roman culture. It's also called classical civilization. And it's a very interesting example of cultural diffusion that the Greeks will combine. Um, they'll combine what the Greeks had done, combined it with their own customs, and create something completely different. So, what happens when these cultures mix? Cultural diffusion, right? Once again, seeing an example of it here. Um, so the Romans were masters at art. They would develop certain sculptures to tell stories that we see here. As you can see in this image on the left, very detailed sculptures. In fact, when you see old Roman sculptures of leaders, those were not just flattering sculptures. Those were not the most ideal. The Romans truly tried to sculpt someone as they really were, as they were, with pimples, wrinkles, and all. And Roman artists, they were very skilled at a type of art called mosaics, which you can see in the background of this slide. They also were experts and skilled at painted frescoes, which you can see on this next slide here. And the reason why we know this is we know this about Rome is because of a town called Pompeii, which is destroyed during a volcanic eruption, which is takes place by the city. And we've excavated the city, and we've seen colored frescoes in Pompeii, just like this. And we've actually seen even graffiti on the walls of homes throughout Pompeii that you can see preserved there. And you can see a lot of this art is actually preserved because of the eruption. And so that's why we know so much about Roman art, and we're really able to analyze it. Now, again, learning in literature and philosophy, the Romans, they borrow from the Greeks as well. And some examples of this would be Virgil. Now, Virgil, he was a Roman writer who wanted to create a modern epic, much like Homer did with the Odyssey. So he's going to write something called the Aeneid, which is going to be another epic of adventure and victory and triumph, just like the Odyssey. And there's going to be a Roman historian called Tacitus. And I took a class when I was doing my major in college in history. And one of the classes was called historiography. And basically, historiography is actually the history of history and how one writes and interprets history. And one person we studied in this college class that I took was Tacitus, because when we're looking at Roman history, when we're trying to find out what the Roman Empire was like, we look at the volumes, the writings that he wrote, because he wrote very factually and it was very accurate. He didn't add a lot of rumors, and everything that he said, he tried to back it up with evidence. And so he gives us a great look at Roman life. Now, the fourth legacy of Rome is going to be their language, Latin. Now, when you think of Latin, you probably think of it in a couple ways. One, you might take a class on Latin, maybe. That's very rare. And two, if you see anything like in medicine or how diseases are classified or species, right? Any type of medical terminology is usually done in Latin. And people today, they call Latin a dead language because it's not used as a language to speak with people, but it is used in a professional sense. And even Latin, as early as the 1900s, was the official language of the Roman Catholic Church. So people did speak Latin in a church setting, at least the priest did. But also, Latin is the root for some languages that we speak today. For example, French, Spanish, Portuguese, Italian, Romanian. Those are all called Romance languages, and they really find their roots in Latin and the old Roman language system. And believe it or not, more than half the words that are spoken in English can find their roots in Latin. So the Latin language is very interesting, and to me, it's a very important legacy of Rome. By the way, on the right is Virgil. That is a statue of Virgil, the writer, and then Tacitus, the historian, is on the left. And the next thing, I would write this down as well. Make sure, or take a picture of it. Make sure you have it somewhere saved on your computer. It's very important because you can see the influence of not only Roman civilization, but Greek civilization as well. For instance, Homer writes the Odyssey in 800 BCE. And Virgil, like I said, he was influenced by the Greek Homer, and he uses the Odyssey for his Aeneid. He models his Aeneid after the Odyssey. And writers who continue to write epics, they're going to be influenced by what the Greeks and the Romans did here. And you can also see on this slide, you can see again Aristotle and the 300s BCE. He'll later influence not only Roman philosophers, just like we learned about Aristotle, the philosopher. He influenced Roman philosophers, people like, and later philosophers, like people like Thomas Aquinas, which we're going to be looking at later, and other philosophers even today. And we also see the idea of a representative government from Rome that was created in 509 BCE, and it really influences the constitution and rights today that exist with the English constitutional monarchy and even with the first written Constitution of the United States in 1776. And two more things demonstrate the legacy of Rome. We have the first is their architecture and their building. So the Romans were the first people who widely used the arch as a form of engineering. And the arch is very interesting because it's a very strong structure. It allows a gap, and nowhere is this more apparent than in the aqueducts. And aqueducts are really an amazing feat of engineering, Roman engineering. Basically, what an aqueduct was it was a structure that could transport water from mountains and hills and rivers from many kilometers away and bring them into cities. And if you want to see an aqueduct, as you can see on this slide at the top, this diagram, this is what you see here. This is a Roman aqueduct, and you can still see these today in person. You can still go and see them, but you can see how it worked. It took advantage of a slope to transport the water downhill using the arches to help support the structure and transport the water downhill to the city where it could be distributed. Now, the sixth thing, and I think the most important legacy of Rome, is Roman law, because the ideas that were pioneered in Roman law are the basis for our legal systems today. So the ideas of, for example, having equal treatment, everyone being equal under the law, comes from Rome. The idea of being innocent until you're proven guilty comes from Rome. The idea that you're punished for your actions, what you actually do wrong, rather than maybe the things that you think or the things that you necessarily say, that idea comes from Rome. And the idea that ineffective laws are unfair, laws can be vetoed and set aside or eliminated, that comes from Rome as well. So the legacy of Rome influences us even today. And that's really the amazing thing, that an empire that was around thousands of years ago can still affect us every day in this way. So I really hope you enjoyed learning about the Roman world, about the Roman Republic, the Roman Empire, the fall of Rome. I hope you learned something that you didn't maybe know before. Thank you for watching. Let me know if you need any help, if you have any questions, and I look forward to seeing you in the next lesson. Thank you.